Hey folks, welcome to the webinar tonight. So we're going to get started on time, and the topic for this webinar is a bit of a deep dive into the Christchurch market. We've just got so much happening in Christchurch, and we've got so much interest in Christchurch, and it's probably 70% of what we do right now. Our investors in Christchurch, ironically, probably 90% are probably from outside of Christchurch. Particularly from Wellington and Auckland, where had good gains in the market, got lots of equity, looking at other options in terms of price point and yield, where the results are better in Christchurch. So just running this, an updated webinar on Christchurch. A lot of people missed that 3 or 4 weeks ago and asked if we were running it again, so I decided to run it again tonight. And tonight my partner in crime, Campbell, is away on another commitment, and so you've got me, David Howes, here tonight to run the webinar instead in Campbell's absence. So I'll make it as interactive as possible. If you've got questions, fire those through, and I'll make sure I check on questions as we go along. So should be maybe about 45 minutes, but feel free to fire in your questions along the way, and I'll try to answer them along the way. But equally, if I miss some of those, I will make sure I answer them at the end of the webinar as well. So thanks for getting here on time. It's always good to start on time. We've got limited time. It's one thing we can all do. We can always make more money, but we can't create more time, of course, unless we're in COVID-19 lockdown, living at home, getting paid for being home and doing other stuff. Now that I hope all of you are back in your businesses and back at work and back in your offices, and things are looking a little more positive now that the restrictions are eased. And so we'll have a bit of a chat about what that means for the market now and where to next from here. And so we'll touch on that, talk about Christchurch in more specifics, particularly the master plan and some of the highlights of the master plan. And that's really gone from a great idea, eight odd years ago now, to a significant amount of infrastructure been completed, and we're now at a stage where we're at a tipping point where there's been so much action and activity that and population growth that we're seeing all sorts of things starting to occur that you expect when you get to a certain stage with a project like this. It's not to be understated, and although it's common knowledge, infrastructure equals jobs. It attracts people, it brings money, it brings tourism, albeit domestic tourism in some cases, when there's international border restrictions, and it ultimately drives growth. And one of the things that was really interesting, about 3 weeks ago now, I think, we had a chat to Rachel from Max Property Management about what was happening on the ground in Christchurch, and she'd been extremely busy, but the irony was the largest customers she had were New Zealand professionals returning from overseas, expats coming back, and looking to re-establish themselves in Christchurch. And I'm sure that's happening in Wellington and Auckland and other main centres where there's good employment. But that's really driving the market amazingly, and in a way that wasn't really expected due to the safety overseas versus safety at home. So we'll just touch briefly on economics 101 and 202. It's not to be understated. It's easy to look at things and think, well, it kind of makes sense, but is it really sustainable? Will it really happen? Will it be a case of build it and they will come? What really drives that? So we'll touch on that. I'll do a quick deep dive into the website as a case study. If you haven't navigated your way around the Property Factory website, particularly into the projects and due diligence area, I'll do a quick helicopter tour of that. We've put a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of money, a lot of effort into presenting projects from an investment point of view in the exact best way possible. Like nowhere else, no other website, nothing else in New Zealand comes close. And so it's one thing to be able to do that. It's another thing to have you understand it and take advantage of it. So we'll just spend a little bit of time on that and make sure, again, if you've got questions around navigation or usability of everything we set out to do to make it easier for you, that'd be a good time to ask me questions around that as well. And then we've got a Christchurch Investors Bus Tour later this month, which I want to tell you about. It's free to join us on, and it gives you the opportunity to have a best part of a 5.5 hour session, tour of Christchurch, commentary with Campbell on board, looking at the infrastructure projects, looking at the location of those projects, relative to where residential investment property has been built and at various stages. The opportunity to really get your head around the lie of the land if you're from outside of Christchurch, and to understand, firsthand the things that are really driving this. But also, Christchurch is one of those cities where there's the right side and the wrong side of Christchurch to be on in terms of values and demand and access to good quality tenants and better capital growth and so on and so forth. So often you find when you hear these stories, you think it kind of sounds good in theory, but the typical investor says, I haven't been to Christchurch for 8 years, or I haven't been there for 5 years, or it's just a demolition site, isn't it? Or, and it's reached that tipping point where there's been significant change. And so that's an opportunity to see that for yourself and see it firsthand, and to be able to do it in a way that if you then work with us and purchase property through us, the cost of even flying to Christchurch for that bus tour with you and your significant other partner is covered by us as well. So I'll tell you more about that. So a little bit of introduction as we get started with the webinar, and it's great to see we've got most of you on board on time, so thank you for getting here promptly. My name's David Howes, if you've just logged in. I've known Campbell since 2001. I've been in business with Campbell, or invested with Campbell 5 different times now over the last 20 odd years, and I joined Campbell in the Property Factory project a couple of years ago, when I saw the history of the Property Factory and Campbell's vision to really digitise what we were trying to do, take it online, make it accessible to people across the country, to be able to help them do that. And we've worked together on the Property Factory project for the last 2 years. I think the Property Factory turns 10 years old later this year. But the irony is my background was retailing. I was a school leaver at age 16, became a supermarket management trainee for Foodtown supermarkets. That brand's now gone, of course. By the time I was in my early 20s, I figured that, and this is after being with Foodtown for 8 years, I think I was 23 or 24, I've been promoted to store manager by age 20, 21, youngest store manager in the country's history, went through the head office, running $80 million a year, buying category. And I was surrounded by all these boring old people that had been there for decades. And in one case, the guy that I report to, his name was Bill, he retired and then came back after about a year because he just had nothing else going on in his life. And I thought, my God, there's just no way I'm going to spend 20 or 30 or 40 years at a supermarket. So I left, moved to Queenstown, opened up the first duty-free store in Queenstown on the Steamer Wharf, recruited 50 people to get that up and running. It was with the DFS group. That's, of course, now the casino on the wharf down there these days. Then moved to Christchurch as general manager of Christchurch. Spent 2 years there. Got to understand the Christchurch property market really well. Ran the Christchurch City and Christchurch Airport location for DFS. And then moved back to Auckland and spent a reasonable chunk of my investing time in Auckland, around other retail chains, Whitkills, Max, and then eventually became a full-time property investor from, I think, 2000. I started investing in the late 90s, 1999, I think, but 2001, I gave up full-time retailing. And, when I look at the landscape today, I'm glad I did. And I got into property investment full-time, built quite a good portfolio, and then decided in 2006 I'd do something crazy and start a property technology company. That company's called Real Estate Investor. And I devoted way too much money and way too much time, about 10 years of my life, building that company. Campbell Venning came on board in the early stages, and we built that business, and that's now listed on the Australian Stock Exchange today as a property technology company. And I would not recommend building technology companies. It's just it's not for the faint-hearted, and it's a good way to spend a lot of money for very little to show. So glad to leave that behind. Still a shareholder in that with Campbell, but we both left that business. Haven't actively worked in it since 2015 when it listed on ASX. And then in the last couple of years, I've invested heavily in the Property Factory project, we call it, with Campbell. Currently an active property investor. Been investing for a long time now, and the Property Factory is a licensed real estate agency. So often people ask us, hey, how do you guys make money? If your service is free to investors, what's the catch? When am I going to get hit with a big fee? Blah, 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 blah. And the Property Factory is a licensed real estate agency, like Bailey's is, like Harcourt's, like any of those brands. The difference with us is we work for investors, we work for first-time buyers, we work for clients, almost like a buyer's agent. where we source stock from across the country. We're paid as an agency on a sales basis, a marketing fee for selling property, like anybody else. However, in our case, all of our focus, all of our research is all for the investor's benefit. So, also a bit of a crazy sailor. I now do ocean sailing. Have done for the last 5 years. I've done 2 Sydney Hobarts, 6 Trans-Tasman crossings, including twice solo, which is crazy enough. Recently circumnavigated Tasmania just for something to do. And I guess partly I share that with you because I'm a normal guy. I got into property as a retailer. I've got 3 wonderful daughters. Been married for, 30 years now, actually. I forget, 29 years. And I turn 50 next month. So, I'm average Joe who's done some what you'd say some extraordinary stuff. But I just started my first investment property, and then my next one, and then the next one, and built out my portfolio, refinanced, paid up, built up, managed rents up, etc. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist if you've been around for 3 getting on 4 property cycles like I have. Just hold on to anything long enough, right? And it's going to go up in value. So there's no rocket science in it. However, it's absolutely true that you can make better than average decisions if you buy in the right location at the right time, hit the market right, buy good quality property that attracts good quality tenants. They fill it up all of the year, and you just get there a bit faster without some of the stress and headaches. And so that's been my background, and I love what we do. We help people get into investing property. We help people build portfolios. We help people who have got existing portfolios do a better job, and it's a real passion. So Campbell is the founder of the Property Factory. It was an idea that he came across when he thought, there only is. When you look at New Zealand, we've got this housing shortage, and still 50,000 houses and growing. And on one side of the ledger, we've got developers developing stock or what we call stock or new properties that are sometimes unsold or sit empty. On the other side of the marketplace, we've got first-home buyers and we've got investors who are looking for property where the numbers make sense, where the location's good, the infrastructure's good, the quality's good, they're going to get good growth. But it's a bit of a minefield if you try to put all that together. And typically, if you look at new property in particular, which is our focus, if you just go to Trade Me or realestate.co.nz or to Ray White or to any of those guys, there's some lovely photos, a glossy brochure, some numbers if you're lucky, and it's contact the agent if you want more information. And they make it really, really hard to get the information from within the project, to see what's sold, to see what's available. And if you want to then compare multiple projects, it's just about impossible. It really is. So the vision Campbell had was to create the solution for developers, builders, and vendors who need volume sales, and then to create a platform for members only, which is a Property Factory, and then to be able to negotiate based on volume for our clients, where we get access to early stage stock, early in the project. We get access to stock at better prices. We get extra rebates, furnishing allowances. We get access to stock below market value. A whole host of things that make it more attractive to investors to deal with through the Property Factory because of the buying cooperative power, if you like, and knowing that the numbers are done and make sense and the due diligence is all done behind the scenes. And to date, it's been a great story. And collectively over 25 years through our various businesses and lives that we've had, we've now gone past 2,000 properties and $1 billion worth of real estate in terms of transactions. And that's just really it's not a brag sheet. That's just really to say, with volume comes experience, and with experience, you just get better at saying that's going to be a great deal. We should check that out in more detail versus that's a waste of time. We've got a bad feeling. It doesn't stack up. The developer's shonky. Doesn't sound like he knows what he's talking about, etc., etc. You just get better at it. You get faster at it. You get faster at saying no. You spend less time mucking around with things that don't stack up, and right down to developers who cut corners and don't do a quality job. You get better at understanding who those are and how to avoid them. And so collectively, we work with probably a dozen key relationships across the country right now in terms of developers that we work with on a recurring basis because we know them, we trust them, they deliver on time, they deliver on their promises. quality's good, tenants are lining up to move in, etc., etc., etc. And, I always say that, if you want to get excitement in life, try not to make your investing exciting. Try and make it boring and repetitive, and a process that you copy and paste and keep doing while it builds away in the background there for you. Go skiing, go mountain biking, go sailing, do something else for your excitement. And what we aim to do at the Property Factory is to give you that process, that formula, the numbers, the research, so you know that every step you take is in the right direction. And I mean, the power of that, I guess by way of illustration, is when I was about 10 or 12 properties into building my portfolio, maybe about 2 or 3 years into it, so this is probably 2003 or 2000, maybe around 2003. I thought, I'm good at this. I know my stuff. I should do something more creative. And I found this rest home for sale in Upper Hutt on the market for $340,000, I think it was. It was owner operator. They were retiring. They wanted to sell it. Hadn't had much luck. I made them a crazy offer. They agreed to leave in 40% being the finance. I got the rest from the ANZ and thought, cool. Now I own a rest home. I'll just hire a rest home manager, put the manager in. I'll make a little profit of $50,000 a year. But hey, $50,000 a year on a $340,000 investment, how good is that? How smart am I? What I didn't know was rest homes run on economies of scale. Mine wasn't that big. 9 rooms, which I increased to 14 rooms, I think, with renovations. Your customers move in when they're quite old. I think my oldest customer was Kate. She was 99 years old when she moved into the rest home and became a customer. And unfortunately, they didn't last very long and they died. And in my case, mine was a stage 2 rest home for dementia patients that are allocated by the government. So you could do no marketing. You just had to wait for more customers to turn up. And if they didn't turn up, you just had empty beds. And rest homes require 24/7 care. And you have staffing costs around the clock that are fixed, regardless of how many beds you have empty or full. And so I learned the hard way with that rest home. And over the next 4 years, I lost $50,000 a year for 4 years, so about $200,000 over 4 years. Before I finally, bit the bullet, turned it into a backpackers, then sold it. I think I might have sold it for $360. It was Upper Hutt on Main North Road at the base of the Rimatakas. It was the first property as you drive into Upper Hutt on the left-hand side. It's not now because a lot of that land's been filled up with more housing. But I just learned a valuable lesson. I strayed outside of what I was good at. I lived in Auckland at the time. It was in Upper Hutt, so it wasn't easy to get to or check on. And I lost a whole lot of money. And I had this attitude of, if I hold on to it long enough, I'll fix it. And the reality is I didn't fix it. And eventually I had to sell it and, walk away. So, since that lesson, which was expensive, and it did slow my progress with my portfolio because now I was pumping cash into something that was losing money, which affected my borrowing ability. Now I stick to my knitting, focus on what I'm good at, and just keep doing the same thing on a recurring basis. What I love about New Zealand and the evolution of the market over the last 15 to 20 years is it's gone from being a country of Auckland and then everything else south of the Bombays to being a multi-city country from a property market point of view. So I'm not saying, parochially that there was only ever Auckland and everybody else. I'm just saying, I come from Blenheim, so I can make a South Island claim. And I've lived in Auckland and Christchurch and Queenstown, so I love a lot of New Zealand, all of New Zealand that I've seen almost. Maybe not Gore or Invercargill, but the rest. And the beauty of the market now is it has evolved into this market of mini markets, and it's not just about Auckland and the rest of the country of the property cycle. We've now got a range of price points, of course, with Auckland. If you look at the median price going into early 2020. Up at 1.2 million. Wellington's had amazing growth since late 2015, early 2016, and that's now pretty heady now up into the low 800s, and yields are really starting to struggle there because rents, of course, don't grow at the same rate as values. Values go racing up, rents don't grow as fast, yields as a percentage drop, investors can't afford to support the debt at the same rate. Eventually, values level off, rents catch up with inflation, and away we go again. However, what we've all seen, of course, in the last 10 years is interest rates coming down and down and down and down to record low levels, as in the lowest we've seen in 100 years plus, right, of record keeping. And so even with the lower yields, when I started investing, if you couldn't get 8%, you wouldn't look at it, and 10% was ideal. Then if you looked at 10 years ago, 6 to 8%, yep, that's all good. Now we say, well, we can get a yield of 4.7% and still be cash flow positive because we're borrowing money at 3%. And one of the things, for those of us who have owned property for 20 years plus, we'll talk about, well, we remember when interest rates are 15 to 20%, and what if it goes back there again, and blah 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 blah. And the thing with the market is the Reserve Bank Act came into place in Australia and in New Zealand in 1991, and at that point, that was all about managing inflation using interest rate controls to ensure that the economy didn't get overheated and run away at crazy rates. Because, of course, we were paying 15% interest rates at times when we were getting 15% annual capital growth. So lots of equity, massive growth, massive inflation in the economy, devaluation of our dollar, of course, but the market was overheating. So as soon as that Reserve Bank Act came into play and those controls have been in place, then since the early 90s, we've seen interest rates managed at a more lower rate and used to help throttle up and down to control inflation in the economy. And then since the GFC, when the government decided, well, that's a bit of a blunt hammer, because guess what? When interest rates go from 6 to 9%, that's a 50% increase in mortgage payments. And that's not fair on mum and dad homeowner who haven't had a 50% pay rise in 2 years. That's a dumb way of managing the economy, because we're causing lots of pain, causing mortgagee sales. Let's get smarter and put LVR restrictions in place for investors, different foreign investment controls in place, LVRs in place for new versus existing to help incentivize development of new stock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've seen that evolution, and we're in a different environment now. And this is scary, but the unnerving thing for all of us is we look ahead, and we're in this bubble now that's COVID-19 free and coronavirus free, which is fantastic. But what we don't all understand is, what does that mean? Okay, so in terms of drivers, so tourism is a bit of a disaster, right? Say goodbye to international tourism for the foreseeable future. Australia will be first, maybe Fiji next. So that, and then we'll have a lot more domestic activity. Hopefully, as a result of what we're limited to in this kind of Australasian bubble, hopefully Australians and Kiwis see more of each other's countries and more of their own. That could help us to restore some of our tourism revenue, because we're not going to get it from China, Japan, the US or Europe in a hurry, right? And the government's not going to let those people in. The other thing that's happening, which is I guess a super booster, if you like, is immigration rules aren't changing. However, there's about 950,000 Kiwis that are expats who don't live in New Zealand. So 5 million in New Zealand, almost 1 million elsewhere in the world. We're seeing those people, some of those people, returning to New Zealand because of health concerns, because of the outlook globally in terms of a global downturn in the US and in Asia and in Europe means less jobs. And we're starting to see that bolster the New Zealand population, right? And drive up demand for housing, help to fill some of those jobs that may not be filled by immigration from other countries. And we're starting to see these things starting to help support demand for tenants, demand for property, et cetera, et cetera. So what we can't guarantee is, say, if you own a $2 million property right now, or a $3 million property in Oriental Parade, or in Herne Bay in Auckland, or Coromandel Hilltop or Queenstown Waterfront, that if you have to sell that in a hurry, that you're not going to take a bit of a discount if you really want to sell it now, because not many people have that kind of money sitting around. Banks are tougher to borrow it from, and so absolutely there will be some discounts. However, it will be mostly in those areas where there's way less demand at the top of the pyramid and less access to capital to fund those types of purchases. So absolutely. However, at the bottom end of the market, first home buyers are now a quarter of the market, and investors as well. Between those two groups who make up half the market, then all of that, what we call bread and butter stock, around the 350, 400, 450, 500,000 price points, or 600,000 in Auckland's case. There's lots of demand for that, good yields and rising rents. So I just wanted to touch on that, because it's easy to sort of look at the doom and gloom and read the newsfeed daily and Donald Trump's and 9 out of 10 politics articles, of course, creating all sorts of excitement overseas, and lose sight of the basics. And as long as we have population growth and people need somewhere to live, and they have incomes or benefits to provide for their cost of housing, then we'll have demand for entry-level stock. And at the Property Factory, we focus on what we call entry-level price point, entry-level stock, the type of stock that you can get higher yields as a percentage, good cash flows, good rents, and if you want to resell it, an owner-occupier is going to want to buy it, a first-home buyer is going to want to buy it, or an investor is going to want to buy it. That's the kind of stock you want. A portfolio of, say, four or $500,000 properties is much safer than a portfolio of $1-2.5 million property, particularly at the early stages of building your portfolio. So the thing about Christchurch, and the thing that keeps Christchurch, I guess, on the radar, is it's not a short-term play. It's not a one-off, one-year blip. It had the unfortunate earthquake 9.5 years ago now, and in that process, 80% of the CBD was either destroyed at the time or had to be demolished and pulled down, including almost all of the high-rise buildings. And so, off the back of that, the city went through, a reasonably consultative process, but had to put together a recovery plan that not only then dealt with the construction requirements of building in an earthquake zone, if you like, the need to dig up and resettle all the soil, all the foundations, to put piles down to much deeper levels to bedrock to ensure that stability of buildings that went back into place was safe. And they had to redesign the city in a way that really started with a fresh sheet of paper. And although there was some criticism at the time, and they took some time, they really did engage with the people of Christchurch and all sorts of people with all sorts of talent and expertise. And they got more than 100,000 suggestions of submissions. And if you can imagine being, the Christchurch City Council having to deal with all the post-earthquake stuff, all the resettling, all the repairing of damaged homes, and also redesign the plan and manage all that feedback and all those submissions and try to organise all that stuff, it was a big job. And they've done really a world-class job. And off the back of that came some of the highest construction standards in the world for that type of construction, for fault line type locations. And often people ask now, but if I invest in Christchurch, can I get insurance? And the irony is, insurance is more easily available on new properties in Christchurch than it is on second-hand properties, of course, because the foundations are to the latest code and standard. Secondly, insurance costs less than Wellington, because Wellington is still on a fault line, that hasn't changed, and there's a lot of old housing and a lot of old commercial buildings on the sides of hills and in a really hard to get to, hard to strengthen, hard to engineer kind of places that make it more of a risky city. So Christchurch has been through a process. They wrote the 61-page document. We've now linked that Christchurch Central Recovery Plan to each of our Christchurch projects, so you can download this as a PDF. It's a stunning document that's visually stunning as well. It's not just a scientific, document full of data. It's got some visually stunning imagery, and their master plan is really, really cool. And often when people look at Christchurch and say, okay, well, I love Wellington CBD, or I love Hamilton CBD, or I love Auckland CBD, why would I buy in Christchurch? Won't there be oversupply? Won't the bubble eventually burst? Won't there end up being a supply versus demand issue? And one of the key things to understand is, if you look at Auckland, if you look at Wellington, if you look at Sydney, if you look at New York, there's one reason why the populations in those locations can keep growing and growing and doubling and doubling and doubling. And that is the height limit. So in those cities, you can continue to tear down 3-story, 5-story, 10-story buildings and replace them with 30, 40, 50-story buildings, in some cases 80 or 100 stories. So if you think about the footprint from a land point of view that's required to put another 2,000 or 3,000 people in a high-rise building, it's tiny. Christchurch has a height limit. And so with Christchurch, with that inside the 4 Avs, that CBD area, one of the magical things about that is not only is there a massive park there occupying a big piece of land, but the high limit means that at the 3-level and 5-level limits around residential and commercial, that eventually that skyline will be built out. And those 3-story properties can't be replaced with 30-story properties. So you do have limited sort of supply as the city develops. And that's something to keep in mind, because, I've seen investors invest in Auckland apartments with stunning views of Auckland Harbour to have a 30-story building go up straight in front of them 2 years later view gone, now looking at the back end of somebody else's building, value, massively eroded, if not destroyed, and suddenly it's not such an attractive investment. So those kind of things you want to think about, because those, again, are the economic, drivers of supply and demand. So Christchurch, really set out to create this vision that they would create a city with a thriving heart and a truly international city. And as a gateway to the South Island and New Zealand's only other 24-hour airport, it really is quite unique. And, if you've travelled to Melbourne, I think Christchurch is comparable to Melbourne in the sense that it really took on this attitude of, we're not just going to rebuild a city, we're going to create an architecturally stunning city that is absolutely beautiful, that people want to live in and be around, where the buildings are almost, good enough to eat. And the materials we're going to use are really going to be amazing. Steel, stone, concrete, glass, timber, that really, really, takes us back to an evolution of a beautiful version of New Zealand, as opposed to cheap, crappy, Neil home housing that Auckland's full of, suburban and New Zealand is full of, along with horrible state housing. And for those of us that have invested and renovated and done our property, we kind of know that, no matter how well you renovate it, it's still pretty butt ugly, and it's never going to be stunning. And as the land becomes more and more valuable, it's pretty hard to not have a situation where you've got this undercapitalised piece of land because the building on it's ugly. Christchurch is doing something completely different, and it really is taking shape. And that's why, if you haven't been to Christchurch in the last 2 or 3 years as an investor, it's, especially now, COVID-19 restrictions are completely eased. Airfares are cheap. I think Lara, who's based in our Christchurch office, was taking her 2 daughters to Auckland for the weekend, and I think they're paying $34 each way on Jetstar. So now's the opportunity to get down there and check it out, because seeing it is believing it, and it truly is stunning. And one of the things that they earmarked was 17 major infrastructure projects inside that 4 Avs, inside that CBD area, from arts to cultural to the convention centre to sporting facilities, a stunning library, even the bus interchange, which I'll show you a photo of, is pretty cool. And they've strategically laid the city out with family-friendly green spaces, the ability to walk around, cycle around, scooter around. All that stuff's really cool. And we actually are seeing people living in Christchurch without cars, professional couples living in the city, working in the city, having all their recreational needs taken care of in the city, and then Ubering or scootering or getting a rental car for the weekend. Like, that's starting to happen. And I've always been cynical about this whole direction around, we won't need cards anymore, we'll just Uber when we want to. That's all well and good, but guess what? If you live out in the sticks and, you live 20 kilometres out of Wellington or 30 kilometres out of Auckland and the bus goes by every 2 hours, that's just not reality. But in this location, it's become reality, because you can live within 5, 10, 15 minutes of a number of great locations, including your work, and you really can live that lifestyle. So Christchurch, there already is, most people don't know this, but Christchurch and Adelaide had the exact same city designers all those years ago. I'm not sure when they were, maybe 200 years ago, 150 years ago, but laid out in a rectangular type of grid, ring roads around the city so you can bypass going through the middle of the city, a river city. And so it's well laid out, it's flat, it's easy to get around, and it's certainly it's a practical grid to build on. So I'm just going to take a breath. I'm going to take a glass of water. If you've got any questions, do you want to just fire them through right now while I take a bit of a mouthful of water, and let's carry on. I'm just keen to make sure we keep the webinar on time for your benefit. But if you've got any questions so far, feel free to fire those through. Nothing at the moment. Cool. I will keep going. Okay, so what happened there? So my controls are a little bit funny. Yeah, so the irony is Christchurch for a long time was our number 3 city, and it really did sit behind Christchurch behind Wellington, sorry, in a distant 3rd place. But Christchurch now, population-wise, is actually larger than Wellington, and is a significant contributor to the national GDP. So when we talked about 80% of the CBD is destroyed, it really did create a blank canvas to not only rebuild the city, but build a different city and actually change the location of where the city actually is. And the CBD has actually moved from where it was. But I guess just to give you a feel for what will drive this city, what will drive jobs, what will drive domestic visitors, what will drive people wanting to live there, move there and work there. The convention centre is a stunning piece of architecture that's due for completion this year, and almost $500 million project. The covered stadium in the CBD. There's only one other place I've really seen this work reasonably well, and that's Wellington with, of course, the biscuit tin. Access to bars, cafes, and restaurants works extremely well after a game. But of course, you're sitting there in the biscuit tin, the cake tin, sorry, without a roof on it. It can be pretty cold in the winter. And then you take Eden Park in Auckland, where it gets a decent crowd, but then it's a good 2 or 3 kilometre walk from the stadium to Ponsonby Road before you get back into the city. If you take Melbourne as an example, where they've got not just one, but 3 or 4 stadiums on the city waterfront, from rugby to AFL to tennis arenas, and all of the transport, the trams, and the bars and restaurants that wrap around that, you've got people who just live in the city. They just live in the city, they work in the city, they follow their sports in the city, and they eat out in the city. And the covered stadium, Christchurch-wise, is another step above the Forsyth Bar Stadium in Dunedin in terms of acoustics, layout and design, but also it'll be a stunning indoor concert venue for big concerts. You can imagine how that will pull crowds, because again, one of the variables you have with promoters bringing big acts to New Zealand is weather. And if you have an outdoor concert because you're going for bigger numbers and then weather trashes the event, that really does make it pretty unpleasant for everybody. So this is going to be a huge anchor for the city. The Metro Sports Centre is not just a building, it's an entire complex, master planned and laid out. And again, another $300 million investment, including an indoor swimming pool and all sorts of other facilities. You've got Turanga, which is the $92 million library project. And again, this is a sight to see. And, when I think libraries, and I think my school days, crusty people, books everywhere, not a lot else going on. You weren't allowed to make any noise. These library venues now are really, they're social venues that capture people and bring them together from a technology and information and research and study and meeting point of view. They're absolutely incredible. And again, they all add to the livability of a city. So that there, when I first drove past that in Campbell, said, what do you think that looks like? I had no idea, but that is the bus interchange. That is the all-weather bus interchange, where buses come into you think about a hub and spoke system, come into the central interchange, people get off, go on the other bus, go in the other opposite direction, they stay warm and dry. So stunning investment. A $20 million Margaret Mahey Playground. Incredible if you got young kids living in the city and you're thinking about living in townhouses with limited spaces, smaller courtyards. This is what they do in Sydney. This is what they do in Auckland. This is what they do in Melbourne. They have access to parks and playgrounds and all those other things, as opposed to having big backyards that they don't want to tie money up in. So, there's another 11 amazing buildings that are at various stages of completion. And, at the end of the day, they bring people, they bring jobs, they bring tourists, they provide confidence, they provide heart and soul to a city, and retail thrives, bars thrive, restaurants thrive, commercial offices thrive. I mean, the Justice Precinct alone employs, I think, 1,200 people across the road from a new apartment development going in there. It's just incredible what that brings in terms of scale and the flow effects of that. And even though COVID-19 has been tough, it's amazing to see how quickly those inner city areas have started to bounce straight back with pent-up demand. And when you've got a good base of residents, all that starts to help. And so you've got a CBD right now where I think the population is up to about 5,500. And it's earmarked to go to 20,000, and started from a very small number, and it's at that tipping point now where retail and bar and restaurant and all those other things start to expand at rapid rate off the back of that population growth. So, at the end of the day, supply and demand drives it. If you don't have a livability city, people work in it, but they don't live in it. And Christchurch is a blueprint for that, I think, across New Zealand, and nothing else really compares. I mean, even Auckland and Wellington aren't as livable when you really break it down and you look at where residential dwellings are, and you look at walking, cycling, up and down hills, all that kind of stuff, and how busy commercially those centres are. This is such a balance of lifestyle versus commercial. I mean, you go through, say, take Sydney or Melbourne in the weekends, they're empty because mostly it's big office towers that are empty, and the CBD is so full of office buildings that the heart of it is actually quite empty. It's the waterfront and the stadium areas where you get the populations. And Auckland's got some of that with the viaduct, but equally Christchurch has got a great balance. So, Christchurch, when you think about right now, for a young couple living in New Zealand and we're choosing between Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch, it's cheap to live there. It's amazing that you can buy a brand new townhouse with a 3 in front of it, that you can buy $350,000 in the middle of Christchurch in the CBD, and still earn great incomes. $120,000 household plus a year incomes, and live at that level of cost. There's more and more head offices now moving away from the Aucklands and Sydneys and Melbournes to the secondary cities like the Christchurches and the Brisbanes. And I took Australasia-wise to say New Zealand's not pioneering here. That's just what happens, because when head offices start to see that they can have employees in what we call secondary locations with lower housing costs, better quality of life, lower commuting times, like less time to get to work because you're already in the city, and then they often will pay similar salaries or slightly lower salaries because they can, then those cities become attractive locations for head offices or manufacturing plants or distribution centres or other things like that. So, and what's really driving Christchurch, it's not international students, it's not people moving out of the suburbs, it's actually young people moving to Christchurch, young professionals, young couples, wanting a vibrant city life, loving the livability and loving the low cost of living. The other thing that drives property values is simple. It's yield-driven value pricing. So, and as an investor, you may have already used this in some cases. And I'll give you an example, right? So if we say in Auckland right now, if I buy a $600,000 property, I can get $500 a week in rent, so I can get about a 4.5% yield. So if I say then, okay, well, that being the case, from a valuation point of view, if 4.5% is what the valuation is commensurate around, then if I can buy a property where I get twice as much rent and it's at a 4.5% yield, theoretically the value will say it's worth twice as much because it's a rent-driven calculation. Or commercial property is known as using a cap rate. What's the rental rate if we capitalise that back up to work out the value? So what you've got happening in Christchurch is you've got yields that are well above the national average. So in terms of major centres, right? So you've got yields in Christchurch that you can buy brand new property for rental yields of, as high as 6.2%. Easily get yields on averages of 5 to 5.3%, where that same type of property and similar price points in Wellington or Auckland for that entry level part of the market might be at 3.5 or 4% yield or 4.5% yield. So what you start to have happen is you have investors starting to say, well, if I can spend $600,000 in Auckland and get a 3.5% yield, or I can spend $600,000 in Christchurch and maybe get almost 2 properties, let's call it 700,000, 2 properties, and get a 5.5 to 6% yield, I can buy a lot more property because I've got more rent as a percentage of income, as a percentage of the value of the property. I've got better servicing from the bank's point of view. So if that's the case, I'm going to start to put more money into Christchurch and less into Wellington or Hamilton or Auckland because the yields are lower in those locations, serviceability is getting harder. And you'll always get lower yields, of course, at the end of a property boom where Wellington's just had 5 years of great growth right now. Auckland's come off a high growth period up until 2016, and rents still haven't caught up with that growth that Auckland had. So yields are lower until inflation pushes those rents up as jobs rise. So rental property, if you think about it, is a yield-based business. Because right now, if I'm buying a rental property and the yield's now 2%, is anybody going to buy it? No. Why? Because if the yield's 2%, how am I going to be able to service the debt on that at 3.5%? How am I going to pay the other costs? Okay. And equally, if we have property where the yields are much higher than average, you start to have higher than normal demand because investors now want to buy those types of properties for better returns. And so as that starts to happen, guess what happens next? Prices start to rise because demand's driving the values of those properties up. And of course, as values rise, yields start to drop because rents don't rise as fast. So valuers in commercial property are always taking a capitalisation-driven view to looking at rent as a proportion of the building's income. That's why, as you probably know, if you own commercial property and it's empty, guess what? The value is going to be a whole lot lower than if there's a tenant in there paying rent and it's a blue chip tenant. And your commercial property can be valued as much as 30 to 50% below market value if it's empty, because at that point there is no income, right? So hence that's the approach that's taken. So when you look at Christchurch rent is cheap from a national point of view. If you look at what $350 to $400 a week gets you from an accommodation point of view, you're going to be paying $550 in Wellington, $600, $650 in Auckland, right? So it's cheap nationally, and the yields are good. And so you've got this perfect storm where, as demand grows, rent rises. It's already higher yields. That'll drive up even more demand for property values and push the values up to the point where yields will drop over time as that's taken up by the demand from investors. So it's a bit of a crazy riddle to try and talk in, but just to really try and get your head around that, you take an example, $500 a week, $26,000 a year in rent on a $520,000 property is a 5% gross yield. Okay, if we had $52,000 a year coming in rent, it'd be a 10% gross yield on a $520,000 property. So, when valuers are looking at locations and they say, well, actually in this location, unless I get a 6% yield, I've got no bias for the property, or the cap rate then is 6%, then what you find is as the cap rate rises, the value drops. It's a crazy concept, but basically, here's an example, right? If I'm investing in, let's say I'm investing in Tauranga, and there's no population growth, in fact, it's in decline, and commercial demand for tenancies are in decline, and the town's a little bit derelict. I'm not saying it is, but just imagine it was. If I was an investor, what would I be prepared to invest there on what basis? Maybe a 10% yield, maybe a 12% yield, because my risk of vacancy rates is higher, my chances of getting capital growth is lower. So I want a higher yield to price in that risk of more vacancies and lower capital growth. So in commercial property, high yield means lower demand, less blue chip. In commercial property, as the yield drops, it basically means people are happy to pay more for the property for a lower yield percentage because it's perceived as better quality property. And there's examples of, you might buy an absolute prestige waterfront commercial property in Auckland, and it could be on a 2% cap rate, right? Or a 2% rental yield. Why? Because it's going to have massive growth ahead of national averages because of the location. So it's just a way of looking at the argument. So what we're saying right now is you've got a cap rate in Christchurch, if you think about residential property, of around 5 to 6% in many cases. It's too high. It actually should be lower. And as demand takes up the supply, it will come down and values will rise as a result of that. It's too much value for money right now, if that makes sense, from an economic point of view. And apologies if I'm leaving you behind a little bit with this, but it's just explaining the logic behind somebody saying, hey, rents are cheap, yields are high, it's not sustainable. This is the economic argument, because people as investors migrate their money to where there's better returns as long as the risks are equal or better as well. If the risks are worse, well, then we've got to weigh those things up. Okay. So what I want to do now, if I can manage this, is I will check for questions. No questions at the moment, but if you've got any, don't hesitate to send those through. And what I want to do right now. So when I talked about that Christchurch recovery document, that's that 61-page document. It's stunning. You can download that off our website or just Google Christchurch Recovery Plan, Christchurch Central Recovery Plan. And it's a really, really well laid out document. And that will give you confidence as to what this is all about and why all the fuss. Okay, so if you're a member of the Property Factory, you should be, because it's free, so why wouldn't you? You should be familiar with the members dashboard. And if you click into the members dashboard, that's where you access all of your good stuff, right? And so if you go into current projects, there's a couple of things in there that allow you to navigate more intelligently and to make it easier to find your way around the website. So when you go into the landing page in here, you'll see there's all sorts of tools in here that allow you to fly around the country and check out different projects, different locations, and see where they are and see the details on those, and then click into the website to check out more information on those. So we've made it really easy because real estate's really three-dimensional, right? It's the amazing thing about real estate is, the landscape, the backdrop, everything that goes with it. And it's not just as simple as saying, that sounds great, and I read the document, it looks awesome. To be able to see where something is and where it is in relation to everything else, and to be able to see how far it is from the city centre and all that kind of stuff, we've made that easy for you to do that using the website. One of the other things we've made it easy for you to do is to say, well, that's great, but I find all this information quite overwhelming. I don't understand all the numbers, and I want more information on what's great and what's the best and what's the worst. And so with each of our projects, we've now sorted all of the information here by yield. So you can say, what's the top performing yield and cash flow right now, and what does that look like, and just click straight to the project. We've sorted the information by 20-year capital growth averages, so you can see the highest growth projects. You can also add yield and growth together to see, if you combine the two, what are the top performing projects right now nationally. We've got Te Atu Peninsula in Auckland, and then Kelston, and then another one in Te Atu, etc., etc. And then where are the lowest price points? If my budget's 500,000, what does that buy? You can see Christchurch, Auckland, Christchurch, and go and check those properties out. So the website's really designed for you to sort and arrange the information easily. The way that we look at that, and the way that we've always done it as investors with spreadsheets for years, we just make it easy for you to do that as well. When you go into the list view, that allows you then to see all those projects across the country and all the numbers as well. So I just want to give you a feel for that and what that looks like. So we're going to use the Christchurch Colombo Street property because it is our most popular project right now. It's half of everything we do, because the yields and cash flows are so good and the price points are so low and the quality is incredible. It's just got such a great project following. And it's built by Fletchers, the largest residential builder in the country, and the quality of it is fantastic. 2.7 metre ceiling studs. So you think 2.4, right? 8 feet. Well, when you go up another foot to 2.7, that makes a big difference to the size of a space and how that feels. Heat pumps, air conditioning, gorgeous kitchens, well thought out storage, acoustically designed glass that, even though there are roads on both sides and traffic going past, because of the double glazing and the acoustic design, it's surreal. You close the door, you close the window, there's nothing. No noise comes in. It's especially designed for this project. It's amazing. And so when you go into the website, all the information is available on the project videos, where the market's at right now. So we talk about buying at the bottom of the market, when there's rising demand and rising prices, not at the top of the market. We provide information on the project, the options that you have in terms of 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, etc. What the location's performance has been over the last 10 years and over the last 20 years. And no surprise that Christchurch has had slower growth in the last 10 years. And you can see there in this particular suburb, it really has gone sideways and just started to pick up now as a result of the demand starting to increase in the market as the rebuild has reached that tipping point and people are flooding back into the city. But Christchurch is miles behind the national average now, and it's got and accordingly it's cheap property as a result of that. We always bring in demand information for that location, for, in this case, townhouse and house sales each year. How long stock's taking to sell. In New Zealand, 30 to 40 is pretty average. 20 to 30 is a hot market. 50 to 60 days is a slow market. And then the size of that market. So $44 million worth of townhouse and house sales just each year, and just in this suburb, just in this type of stock alone. So all that stuff's in there for you to do your research around. So we always get ideally 2 regional assessments, and we give you the range of those assessments. generally there's a range in there of, $40, $50, $60 because we usually have furnished and unfurnished in terms of CBD locations. We calculate all the cash flows for you on a weekly from a weekly point of view, and then for first home buyers we work out their costs if they were to buy this property on a 10% deposit, what it would cost each year to own with all the costs. If they were to buy it and put a flatmate in as well, what it would cost them to own and occupy that. So all that information is done. And, as I said earlier, when we talk about transparency, one of the challenges you have, let's have a look at questions that come through. So I'll come back to, we've got a couple of questions there. Keep sending through your questions and I'll come back to those. So in terms of transparency, in terms of stock available right now, then you can easily see what stock's available, at what price point, how big is it, internal square meterage, external square meterage, which way does it point, all of that kind of stuff that you want to know as an investor when you're selecting property to either own or to occupy. And then we had to write a month ago downloadable documents because we didn't appreciate that just because they were blue, that not everybody appreciated they were PDF documents. So every one of these is a link, and there's more than 100 pages of documents here against every project. And so the reason why it takes us about 80 to 100 hours of work to get a project to the point where you see it is because all of the calculation work we've done in the background. So we've worked out the cost for you. We factor in borrowing 100% of the money to buy an investment property, assuming you've got security in an existing property and you want to calculate 100% of the debt as part of your costs. We put in the rates, the body corp, we put in a provision for maintenance from year 3 onwards. Of course, these are new properties. There's really no maintenance for a number of years, but we put that in as a safety. And then we work out the annual cash flow and the weekly cash flow before tax. So you've got all that kind of information. So all of that's done as part of the process, and it's all there for you to take advantage of. So make sure you take advantage of all the resources that are in here, specifications, body corp plans, all that kind of stuff. And all the assumptions that we use in the calculations, they're all in here in their detail. And, a lot of people don't realize that in this example with this project, the body corp also includes loss of rent cover and landlord's contents as well, and malicious damage. Now, again, body corp normally includes insurance, but normally those types of things you've got to go and get separately as a landlord. In this case, in this project, that insurance portion as part of the $2,500 a year, it gives you all that extra protection as part of the inclusion. We also include property management costs in there as well as part of those costs, and vacancy rates, so you know that the cash flows are real. So photos of the project, it's completed. It was completed at the end of last year. It's about 50% sold down now. It's a mixture of owner-occupiers and investors, and the interiors are really stunning, well-designed, spacious, and really high class, just really, really good quality. And the bathrooms are nice. And so again, you can use the website to do all your mapping. You can use the website to, hopefully this pop-up screen opens up for you in front of you. You can do all the street view stuff, and you can say, okay, even if you live in Auckland or Wellington right now, what does the project look like? What else is in the area? What's across the road? You can walk up and down the street. I don't know if you've used Street View, but you can literally walk down the street online. Like, why would you drive it? You can just walk down the street and you can see what the neighborhood looks like and what else is around there. It really is incredible with this technology. So I steered through it because most people don't realize the wealth of information that's available. When we quote stats, so in this example, we quote, what is it? 68% of the dwellings in this suburb have 1 to 2 occupants. 30% have annual household incomes above 70,000. Why is that important? Well, the perception of a number of investors is, I need 3 bedrooms. If I don't have 3 bedrooms, who wants a 1-bedroom property? Well, when you have 68% of dwellings in the entire suburb having 1 to 2 occupants, that's your target market. And then when you have another, 25% with 3 people, even 2-bedroom dwellings, that's your target market. So that's why we put that data in there. So within the website, you can then click from the bottom of the website off into the demographics. So these numbers aren't just us pulling out-of-date guesstimations in terms of census data. This then takes you off to a suburb profile page and has all that information. So if you don't know the suburb, you don't know the location, you can check all this kind of stuff out. see where it is, see the history, have a look at all the services that are around there in terms of schools and shops and nightclubs and cafes. All that stuff's been done. And this is stuff that's important, right? Because when you say who's going to live here, is there transport available, are there schools available, where will they send their kids? You want to know this stuff. So this is all accessible through the Property Factory website as a member. And we do this so you can do your own research in terms of, that information. And where I quoted, 68%, there's your 68%, the 36 and the 32 who make up those 1 to 2 occupants in that suburb. So take advantage of this resource because it really will help you in terms of doing your research. Okay, so and the other thing we do as much as possible when we're doing more and more of it is let me just going to play this. I'm not going to turn your sound up.
Hi guys, Campbell here, sitting in the 2-bedroom.
Turn the sound down. Okay, so my purpose of doing this is just, hopefully you see this pop up. It's just to show you an idea of how this project is unique and the location, the green spaces, the size of it, the layout, the fit out, the car parking, the parks area, the high ceilings, and how spacious it is. It's not 5 or 6 units squeezed into a skinny section with no off-street parking. It's a really, really well laid out project that when you zoom right out into, I'm not sure how well it's going to feed through to you in terms of the webinar, but if you look at the exterior of it, this is why it's a magnet for tenants, and this is why there's been a waiting list for most weeks up until now, because it's just such a nice location. It's 15 minutes from the CBD in terms of walking, 1.5 kilometres, and it's just really, really well done. So, take advantage of these types of resources and this type of information through the website. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to go into questions. So Michael Stubbs says, Gareth Coonan says the housing market failure has caused a large undersupply in some regions, especially Auckland, but a surplus in others, especially Christchurch, October 2019. Is Christchurch housing still been overbuilt? So Gareth, good question. I mean, you can't just say Christchurch because Christchurch has 560,000 residents. It's made up of a CBD and it's made up of all these suburbs, and there's development happening all over the city in the centre and out into the suburbs as well. So it's always about, there is growth, there is demand, there is a net shortfall, but absolutely, if you buy overpriced property in the wrong location, without services, without infrastructure around it, where there's going to be less appeal, less demand, absolutely you could be worse off. You could have a vacant property for a month or 2 months. You could have rents lower than you expect. If you buy good quality property in the right location and you have good proven tenant demand and you know that it's surrounded by schools, transport, jobs, all the recreational facilities, then you can have a great story and a great result as a restaurant, as an investor. So I always avoid extreme statements of everything's oversupplied, everything's great, everything's bad, markets up, markets down. There's always pockets within markets and opportunities within those pockets, but you've got to know your markets. Right now, absolutely, could you buy an apartment in the CBD and end up with lack of demand? Yes, because there's some really poorly designed buildings in some cases where the developer overlooks what tenants want. I mean, there's developers who develop property that don't account for storage, don't account for putting wardrobe spaces into bedrooms. They do silly things to cut corners that as soon as you go to rent that out, you then limit your market or your appeal. So it's got to do your research. And one of the reasons why we interviewed Rachel, who owns Max Property Management, who's run that business for 10 years in Christchurch 3 weeks ago, who's managing the tenancies for this project, was to get an update from her on what's happening on the ground. And we published that as a podcast, as a video interview. And she explains what's working and why the demand's there, who the tenants are, and exactly why people are moving in. So absolutely, you've got to be careful. In any city, you can have situations where there's oversupply due to project quality, price, location, etc. So just be aware of that. So Tanya says, puzzled why somebody would want to invest in properties in the Oldhurst, marketed as Riccarton. They're not, because they're a long way out of Christchurch, so don't tap into city centre rejuvenation. They are cheap but stylish, cheap enough that a renter could buy themselves. So I think it would be hard to find renters that far out. If they choose to live that far out, it may be because they can buy themselves. TPO promoting these. I'm struggling to see how these fit as an investment. They're quite a risk. Yeah, so good question, Tanya. So absolutely. So we provide a range of projects because equally, many of our customers are first-home buyers, and so there's locations in terms of adjacency to the city that make complete sense from an investment point of view and a first-home buyer point of view. So are first-home buyers and investors buying in this project? Yes. If you take Maryvale, for example, absolute blue-chip suburb, entry level, I think, 500 and something, I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly. In a suburb where it's full of $1 to $2 million houses, right? If I'm a first home buyer and we're a professional couple and say we're on $150,000 a year between us and we've got capital, I might choose to buy Maryvale because maybe I don't want to live in Sydenham, or maybe I don't want to live in Riccarton. So that stock appeals to first home buyers. That stock appeals to investors who want blue chip locations, who are happy to wear, a yield of 3.5% and negative cash flow in the short term because that's what they want to do. The reason why we sort in a range of projects for you automatically on the website, from highest yield to lowest, highest cash flow to lowest, positive to negative, highest growth rate to lowest, is some of those things are diametrically opposed, right? Highest capital growth rate, lowest yield, and vice versa. Think about the whole argument we had before about yield in relation to value. So, as long as there's growth in the suburb, as long as there's demand, as long as it's priced well, built well, and has demand, then absolutely some locations and some projects will be more owner-occupier driven versus investor driven. And those Riccarton projects on our website are a good example of that. Definitely more demand by owner-occupiers and first-home buyers than by investors. And so that's why we have all of the mapping in terms of the location. You can see all the facilities and infrastructure around those. All the information is suburb specific. So, but absolutely, if I live in Riccarton and I'm 4 kilometres out of the city, I know if you live in Christchurch, that seems like a mile or, an eternity to get 4 kilometres in the city, but it's not. If I live in Riccarton, I've still got the city on my doorstep. I mean, man, if I live 4 kilometres from Auckland CBD, I'm pretty happy. Parnell or wherever that is. And so it might appear that Riccarton is a long way out, but it's horses for courses, and that's why every project's got to stand on its own 2 feet. And we provide ranges and options because not everybody wants CBD. Some people want suburbs. Some people want high growth. Some people want high yield. And so that's part of it as well. But always do your due diligence. We will always put all the information online on every single project to the same level, transparently, and then you can do your own research, and we can help you with that as well. Matthias has asked, how are the laneways apartments progressing, and when they're expected to be completed? So, good question. So, just for an update for our investors on that project. So, laneways or Turm Street across the road from the Justice Precinct, where there's 1,200 new jobs. That developer late last year. Where are we? We're 2020. Early this year, hit the skids, got into difficulty in terms of funding, and so what has happened, and Campbell's been completing our a handful of investors updated who got into that project in last year, is a new developer has taken over that project. He's now settled the land. It's the same developer that's just completed the Latimer project, which is built to a really, really high standard, all concrete and steel construction at 272 Barbados Street. He's now taken on that project, and he's now looking to get that construction underway. So all those clients, same price point, same project, same plan, same everything, but just some delays in kicking that off. So that's that will be full steam ahead. You'll see that appearing on our website again, probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks, I expect, and some wholesale pricing for property factory investors as well. And again, really cool project, but again, the market can be punishing for developers. It's not as simple as building something and making a ton of profit. Sometimes there are variables to navigate their way through, including COVID-19, as you're all aware. Okay, so what I want to do is, thank you for those questions. I want to quickly just jump back to where we are at and carry on and try and get wrapped up in the next 5 or so minutes, just to really then come to an open Q&A session at the end with the other questions you have. But I just wanted to jump into the website because there's a ton of resources and a ton of information in there, and it's designed so that you have access to the same information we have. So take advantage of it. And the irony is, the more time you spend on there and the more that you understand the differences between projects, the easier you'll find it to spot a good one, right? Or one that matches your rules or your criteria. And in terms of how we help you, I mean, we're a 100% digital agency, right down to digital signing, where you can sign a contract with your fingers. And nothing has reinforced that direction more powerfully than COVID-19 and the period we all went through together. And we had hundreds of people attend our webinars, and we, from mid-April onwards, had people starting to go back into contracts again, doing everything digitally. So we've learnt a lot from increasing our digital reach without sounding like a geek. And we do even more with video, with podcasts, with making webinar replays available afterwards, because we know you're busy people and you want to access this information where it suits you as well. So take advantage of that. We work with a team of people across the country, a growing list of professionals that are valuers, property managers, building inspectors, accountants, mortgage brokers, lawyers, that can help you in all of the process. So don't be lost. Don't hesitate to say, who can help me? We're not exclusive. We work with a number of professionals that are good at what they do. You'll always have choices and options. We don't own any of those businesses, and we're not pretending that they're independent when they're not. They are independent, and they love us, we love them, and they look after our clients. So that's why we make it easy for you. Not all professionals are created alike. There are professionals that are not specialists at new property in particular, and won't always know what they're doing. And we can do that, in locations across the country. And often we send, Lara's been out 3 times this week capturing photos and drone footage and other video footage for projects for clients who are in those projects or looking to go into those projects or wanting to see progress updates where we've got projects under construction right now. So, all that stuff we can do digitally and make it available for you as well. And so, the research you do through the website, the things you'll learn going into contract, the things you'll learn in the due diligence phase with finance and with your lawyers and all the things the questions you have, that's how you learn. And the more you do, the more you'll know, and the better you'll get at it. And the more you'll learn, that you'll never stop learning with property. And that's the beauty of it. So if you're a first-time investor, you just got to jump in and start looking at the stuff, start absorbing it, start asking good questions, and we can help you. And one thing to be really aware of, and we've got a client today who's now 6 weeks into finance, has had 2 15-day working day periods extended, one on the back of the other, because finance is taking longer. Processing loans is taking longer. Banks are asking for more information. They're asking for statements from employers that they're going to keep you on. They're asking for forecasts that for the next year or 2 years, in terms of cash flow forecasts with your business. They're asking for stuff that makes it a little bit more painful, takes a bit longer, but money has been lent. So be patient, and we'll help you work with it, and we'll help you get there. Through the website, you've got access to a great tool that hundreds of people have now requested over the last 9 months since we released it. It's called an investment capacity report. And it takes 2 minutes to request. Do it through the members dashboard. It's free. And it helps us to produce for you a report that shows you whether you're heavier on equity or heavier on income, and helps you understand what you need to buy more of next to build a balanced portfolio. So if you're strong on equity but weak on income, you need yield, you need cash flow. Otherwise, you're going to run out of borrowing power. If you're early stage, limited equity, you've got good incomes, you need capital growth. You need to get into markets where their early stage and next growth cycle, like Christchurch, like parts of Auckland with infill housing, like parts of Wellington with infill housing, so that you can get good capital growth over the next 1 to 5 years. You don't want to buy into a market that's come to the end of a 5-year growth period, and now you've got to sit on your hands for 2 or 3 years while you wait for rents and yields to catch up, and now you're going sideways. So we can help you figure out the math behind that, because it is just mathematics, and then which properties suit you best, because if you understand that, then every step you take forward gets you to your goals faster. So our team can help you with that. We've got a team across the country. I think it's 12 or 13 people now working in the property factory business. So we're here to help, and we provide those tools and those resources, that advice. It's just part of our service, and it's a free service. So spend time on the website. Do not hesitate to ask us any questions at all. There are no stupid questions. The only stupid question is a question you don't ask, right? There's lots of dumb answers in life, but there aren't dumb questions. So don't be shy. And if you're a first timer, or you're new at buying off the plan or new property where contracts in some cases are 70 pages. They can be a bit daunting. So don't hesitate to get our team to talk you through that. And pre-approvals are taking time. So the sooner you talk to your broker, or we can help you again find a specialist broker, the sooner you get the process started. And again, if you need us to organise people for you to go and do your pre-purchase inspections to get property management underway before you settle, so your tenants moving in straight away, or get valuations organised, then take advantage of that. So one of the things we've had success with is people coming to Christchurch and going for a tour of Christchurch with Campbell, and looking at the lie of the land, different projects, different competitive projects, where all the infrastructure and development's going in, and all the stuff that's happening that you just get a different feel for in a three-dimensional way with a commentary that you don't always get through the website. So we're planning a Christchurch market bus tour for the 22nd of June. It's free for our clients. It's going to kick off at 10:30 in the morning and be done by 4. And that way, if you're travelling in and out for it, you can get in and out in a day. You're not going to have a super early start in terms of a red-eye flight, as they call them, or have to stay overnight. But you can, of course. So you'll meet in the CBD around 10:30. You'll board the bus for a tour of the city. Campbell will give you a commentary of the city from top to bottom, and you'll find it really, really insightful. Not just the CBD, but all the infrastructure that's happening in terms of the ring roads, the new highway bypasses around the city, the Cranston Street extension that's going to then bring people from north of Christchurch into the city and cut 20 minutes off travel time, and what that will mean with those suburban areas opening up in terms of demand and house and land opportunities in the future. So you'll find it really, really valuable. You'll stop at the new Riverside Market for lunch, and that thing opened, when was it? I think after Christmas. But they were doing $1 million a week in there, or was it $1 million a day within 12 or 13 weeks of opening? Just an incredible story. Maybe it's $1 million a week across the various outlets there. And they are built to an international level where the fit-outs in those bars and cafes and restaurants must be $500,000 to $1 million. They are there to stay in there for the long term, and they're just instantly busy. So a good example of lining up people and product and story and getting it right. So back on the bus after a toilet lunch stop, and a tour to continue the tour, and then we'll wrap up at a really nice space we'll have set up that we can use, or one of the new retail spaces not occupied yet, at 350 Colombo Street. We'll put on drinks and nibbles as well. If you need to bail at 3 to catch flights, you can. If you want to stay until 4, chat to Campbell, chat to the team, chat to each other. Amazing what investors learn off each other when they're in the same room, sharing their war stories and sharing their successes. So take advantage of that as well. So if you come to Christchurch from outside of Christchurch, just so we don't disadvantage the non-Christchurch people, if you fly in and fly out and you decide to purchase from the Property Factory, then we'll refund economy domestic flights for a couple from anywhere in New Zealand to Christchurch as part of that. And again, we've done that historically. It's been popular, and it makes sense. We succeed as a business building a great relationship with clients. We build a portfolio over 5 to 10 years by us working with them, by them buying good quality properties that give good financial returns and increasing value over time. So that's how that works. So that's the webinar tonight. That's what I wanted to cover with you in terms of an update. So what I'm keen to do now is see if there's any more questions. If you have more questions, fire those through now. I can see there's a whole bunch of people online still. Anything at all about the Property Factory, how we do what we do, about Christchurch, anything at all, because we're here to help. We love what we do. We've done well out of property, both of us, and we've both had different paths. It's given us choices. It's given us options. We're both, I'm about to turn 50. Campbell's a tad, I think he's 51. But we're both young guys, really, young at heart. We love teaching, we love sharing. And we just love being immersed in property. There's nothing cooler than getting on a new development site and seeing the developer's vision for a new project where he's got the story right, the design right, the numbers right, the configuration right, the market right in terms of who it appeals to. It's exciting. And if you love real estate, if you love going on a holiday and looking at real estate windows and seeing what sells for what prices, then, I guess that's part of why we love what we do. So our teams across the country, Auckland, Wellington, Hamilton, Christchurch. We've got people joining our team all the time. We're about to advertise for 1, 2, 3, 4 new roles. Well, sorry, we've got one starting, 3 new roles, one starting. So our team's about to grow to 16 nationally. And then we've got more projects coming on stream across the country as well, including more stock in Auckland. It's hard work and it takes time, because maybe 1 in 10, if we're lucky, usually 1 in 20 projects actually stack up financially, quality, developers track record, location, story, investment, etc., and actually make the cut to make it to the website. So you won't see projects every week, but equally, the majority of what we do is great, investor stock from an investor 101 point of view, and does the job. And we're not in the business of saying, here's 100 choices. We're in the business of saying, here's 4 or 5 good ones, and guess what? Add that to your portfolio. You'll get good cash flows, you get good growth, and you'll be ready to talk about what do I do next in the next 12 or 24 months, And it's not a race. It's about buying 5. If you just buy 5 properties over 10 years, pay them down, let them double in value, double again after another 10 years, let the rents go up, you'll have lifestyle choices for the rest of your life from a retirement point of view. 6-figure incomes. It's not a race. You just got to go through the cycle, do it steadily, build your portfolio. And those of you that have already got 3, 4, 5, 10 properties, you've been there, you've been through the cycle. You started 10 years ago, you started 20 years ago. Time's done the work, and we've got lots of those clients. And the irony is, we've got a client who is a bus driver, believe it or not, earning less than 50 grand a year, driving buses because he loves it, and he owns a $9 million property portfolio. And he's going to be our bus driver for the day on this tour, because we organised that today. We said, how cool would it be if the guy leading from the front, literally driving the bus, is a bus driver who owns investment property? And he is. And he's built property over a very long period of time. Real character. But and that's the beauty of property. It just gives you choices. Then you can do what you love with your time. But you're not going to do nothing. You're not going to sit at home watching Netflix, eating 5 meals a day and eating too much ice cream and chocolate, because that's not going to get you very far. And if any of you got cabin fever during lockdown, you know full well that even if you could choose to do nothing with your time, it would drive you stir crazy. So it's our model, it's our focus. It just works over time, and it's just one step at a time. Conservatively, nothing crazy, nothing risky. Good customers, good property, good markets, good growth stories. So if you've got any other questions, fire those through now, and I'll make sure I answer those before I wrap up. Otherwise, we'll have a recording of this webinar online the next couple of days. We'll send you the follow-up information. Oh, and also, sorry, good question. Where can you book? So if you just go click on the events button on the top of the website, the propertyfactory.co.nz website. If you go to the events page, you can book for the bus tour there. So make sure you book for that, because we will have limited seats in the sense that, yes, we have to hire a bus with a fixed number of seats, because you all got to have seatbelts. So make sure you enroll for that, and we'll send you out full information on that. But if you want a chance to spend, best part of 5.5 hours, one of the best property investment brains in the country, especially on the Christchurch market, and on investing in general, Campbell, a guy who's developed, built, renovated, sold, built and held, done all sorts of stuff, short stay, long stay, all across the country, then you won't get a better brain that you can get to pick for the best part of 5.5 hours. So it's a great opportunity, if nothing else, from an educational point of view. So consider that seriously. Well, folks, thanks for letting me host this webinar tonight in Campbell's absence. Thanks for putting aside an hour and 20 of your time. I wish you all of the best with your investing, and hey, we're here to help, and there are no catches. If you've got questions, we're here to help. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to help steer you in the right direction, and here to help you build a good portfolio. So, folks, I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you either online or face-to-face real soon. Thanks, and have a great night.